Snow fell quietly over the mountains, covering everything in a thick white blanket. The wind howled through the trees like a lost spirit, rattling the wooden cabin that stood alone on the edge of the frozen forest. Inside that small cabin lived a man named Ethan Cole, a human who had chosen silence over the noise of the world. The storm outside was strong that night, stronger than any he had seen that winter. The fire in his fireplace crackled weakly, trying to fight the cold that pressed against the walls. Ethan sat beside the fire with a mug of hot tea in his hands. He stared at the flames, listening to the storm's wild song. The world outside was deadly. No one would survive long out there tonight. He thought about how far he was from anyone, how no one ever came to visit. But just as he closed his eyes, thinking he might finally sleep, there came a sound. Knock. Knock. Ethan froze. His eyes opened wide. At first he thought it was the wind hitting the door, but the sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. It was soft, weak, but real. He stood up slowly. No one should be outside at this hour. No one should even be able to reach his cabin through the snowstorm. He walked to the window and tried to see outside, but all he could make out was the endless white. The snow was falling so hard that even the porch was blurry. Still, the knocking came again, this time quieter, almost fading. Ethan's heart beat faster. He took his flashlight, unlatched the heavy door, and pulled it open. The cold air hit him like a wall, sharp enough to cut through his coat. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then he looked down, and his breath caught in his throat. A small figure stood at his doorstep. It was a child, but not a human child. Her skin shimmered faintly, silver blue under the falling snow. Her eyes were large and glowing softly, full of fear and hunger. Tiny frost crystals sparkled in her dark hair. Her clothes were thin, torn, and covered in ice. She was shaking, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Please. Her voice was weak, trembling like the wind. Food. Ethan could hardly believe what he was seeing. An alien right in front of him. He had seen reports of alien life before, but never thought he'd meet one. And here she was, a starving alien child lost in a human storm, begging at his door. He hesitated for a heartbeat, staring into her glowing eyes. She looked like she could collapse any second. Without thinking further, Ethan reached out his hand. Come inside quick, he said. You'll freeze out here. The child blinked, almost afraid, but stepped forward slowly. When she entered the cabin, warmth wrapped around her fragile body. She shivered uncontrollably, her lips pale and dry. Ethan shut the door behind her and hurried to the fireplace. He grabbed a thick blanket and wrapped it around her small shoulders. Sit near the fire, he said softly. You're safe now. She didn't understand all his words, but she seemed to understand his tone. She nodded weakly and crouched near the fire, holding her hands close to the flames. Ethan made her a bowl of soup and handed it to her carefully. She sniffed it, then began to eat slowly, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. For a long moment, Ethan just watched her. The firelight reflected on her silver skin, making her look almost otherworldly, beautiful and strange at the same time. Her eyes, though alien, carried the same fear and hope any human child would have. What's your name? He asked gently. She looked up, hesitated, then whispered, Lyra. Ethan nodded. I'm Ethan. Don't worry, Lyra, you're safe here. She looked around the small cabin, her eyes landing on the window. Her expression changed suddenly. Fear returned. She pointed outside and whispered something Ethan couldn't understand. Her words were soft but urgent. Ethan walked to the window and looked out. The snow was still falling, but in the distance, through the white curtain, he saw faint red lights moving between the trees, like glowing eyes scanning the forest. He frowned. What is that? He murmured. Lyra trembled and hid her face in the blanket. She whispered one word again and again, her voice shaking. Hunters! Hunters. Ethan turned to her, realizing she wasn't just lost, she was being chased. He closed the curtains quickly and added more wood to the fire. Outside, the storm roared louder, almost as if it wanted to hide them from whatever was coming. Ethan looked at the small alien child trembling by his fire and felt something heavy in his chest. Pity, fear, and a strange protective feeling he hadn't felt in years. Whatever she was running from, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't send her back out into the cold. The snow kept falling quietly outside, but inside that lonely cabin, destiny had already changed. The storm raged outside the cabin through the long night. But inside, the warmth of the fire kept the small room glowing with soft orange light. Ethan sat by the hearth, watching the alien child sleep on the couch wrapped in his old wool blanket. The storm wind screamed against the walls, but she finally rested peacefully, her breathing slow and calm. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. He had seen many strange things in his life, crashed satellites, meteor showers, and the broken technology of fallen drones, but never a living alien. And now one slept right in his home. He stared at her small face, noticing how her skin glowed faintly under the firelight. It wasn't like a lamp or reflection. It was gentle, like the light of the moon trapped beneath her skin. Her hands were small and thin, her fingers ending in delicate blue tips. Every few moments she whimpered softly in her sleep, whispering words in a language Ethan didn't understand. He could tell she was dreaming, perhaps of home or of something she lost. He sighed, leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. "What have I gotten myself into?" he murmured. He had no food to spare, no idea who she was, and no way to contact anyone without risking her being taken away. Still, something inside him told him to protect her. By morning, the storm had calmed. Light crept through the frosted windows, turning the world outside into a sea of white. Ethan stepped quietly to check on the child. Her eyes opened slowly, bright silver blue like liquid light. She blinked and tried to sit up, clutching the blanket tightly. "Hey," Ethan said softly. "You're okay. You're safe now." She looked around, unsure, her small face still tired and pale. "Where is this?" she asked in broken English. Her voice trembled, unsure of each word. "You're on Earth," Ethan replied. "My home. You knocked on my door last night," she tried to remember. Her hands tightened around the blanket. "Snow, cold. Run," she whispered. Then her eyes filled with tears. "They come again." Ethan crouched beside her. "Who's coming?" She hesitated, then slowly raised her arm. Her sleeve slipped back, revealing a strange mark on her skin, a glowing circle with moving lines like light trapped under glass. Ethan reached out but stopped just before touching it. The symbol pulsed faintly, alive, like it was scanning the air around it. "What is that?" he asked. Lyra looked frightened. "Mark, from them," she said. "Hunters. They put this. It means—" "I run," Ethan frowned. "Hunters?" She nodded slowly. "Bad ones. They take my people, make work, make fight. I run, I hide, but they find me." Her voice broke and she wiped her tears with her small hands. Ethan felt a chill deeper than the cold outside. He didn't understand all of it, but the meaning was clear enough. She was escaping something terrible. Ethan stood up and looked through the window again. The snow still glowed under the morning sun, but faint red lights blinked far in the distance. They were low, steady, and unnatural, machines, maybe ships. "Damn," he muttered. "You weren't dreaming last night," he turned back to her. "Listen, Lyra, you're safe here, okay? No one's going to hurt you." She looked at him with wide eyes. "You help me?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, I'll help you." Her lips curved into a weak smile. "Humans, kind." He wanted to smile back, but his stomach twisted. He didn't know how long he could keep her safe. If whoever hunted her had ships that could travel across galaxies, they could find a cabin in the woods easily. Still, he couldn't turn her away. Later that day, Ethan cooked some food, simple bread, soup, and water. Lyra watched him with curious eyes. Every time he moved, her head tilted slightly, studying him like he was the strange one. When he handed her the food, she whispered something softly that sounded like "thank you." Hours passed. The sun sank behind the snowy mountains again. The forest outside grew dark and silent. Ethan sat near the fire, carving a piece of wood just to keep his hands busy. Lyra sat quietly beside him, her eyes on the flames. Suddenly, the light in the room flickered. The fire dimmed for a moment, then flared back to life. Lyra gasped and clutched her glowing arm. The mark on her skin was shining brighter now, flashing in short bursts like a signal. "What's happening?" Ethan asked, standing up. She shook her head, frightened. "They close. They find this." She pointed to the glowing mark. Ethan cursed under his breath. "A tracker," he realized. "They're tracking you through that mark." Lyra looked panicked, tears filling her eyes again. "I can't stop it." Ethan ran to his tool bench, grabbed a small cutting laser he used for metal repairs, and returned to her side. "Then we'll remove it," he said firmly. Lyra stared at him in shock. "You help, really?" He nodded, meeting her frightened eyes. "You came to my door." That makes you my responsibility. Outside, a deep humming sound began to rise over the snowy valley. The hunters were coming closer. The window glass trembled from the vibration of approaching ships. Ethan looked at Lyra, then at his tools, then at the door. "Hang on," he said. "We don't have much time." The storm outside might have ended, but a much greater one was about to begin. The morning sun tried to break through the gray sky, but the storm had left a heavy silence. Every tree outside Ethan's cabin was covered in frost, each branch bending under the weight of snow. Inside, the air was still, too still. Ethan stood by the window scanning the distant hills. What he saw made his chest tighten. Faint red dots flickered in the white horizon. They were moving, slow, deliberate, searching. He stepped away and closed the curtain quickly. "They're here," he muttered. Lyra sat quietly near the fireplace, her glowing mark wrapped tightly in a torn piece of cloth to hide its light. She looked up, frightened. "Hunters?" she asked in a small voice. Ethan nodded grimly. "Yes, they must have followed your signal through the storm." The human's mind raced. He had no weapons strong enough to fight aliens, no way to call for help without exposing her. His cabin was a target now. The only thing he could rely on was his knowledge of the land and his will to protect the child. He turned to her. "We need to move now." Lyra looked weak, still recovering from the cold, but she nodded. "Where we go?" Ethan packed quickly, some food, his tools, blankets, and a small battery pack for heat. "There's an old mine under the ridge," he said. "No one knows it exists anymore. If we can reach it, they won't find us easily." Lyra clutched his coat sleeve. "They strong. You human. You can't fight them." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Then we won't fight. We'll outsmart them." Outside, the snow crunched softly under his boots as he stepped out first, testing the air. The wind had calmed, leaving behind a strange quietness, the kind that made every sound sharper. He helped Lyra climb down the steps, and together they started through the frozen woods. For a long time they said nothing. The only sound was the soft rhythm of their feet in the snow, and the distant hum of unseen machines. Every few minutes Ethan would look up, scanning the skies for movement. Suddenly, a beam of red light cut across the forest, slicing through branches. Ethan pulled Lyra down behind a fallen log. Above them, a small drone hovered, its lenses glowing. It buzzed like a giant insect scanning the ground. Ethan's heart pounded. He whispered, "Don't move." The drone floated closer, the hum growing louder. Lyra's body trembled beside him. The glowing mark under her bandage began to flicker faintly again. Ethan quickly took some snow and pressed it over the cloth, cooling it down. The light dimmed slightly. The drone hovered for another moment, then turned and drifted away into the distance. Only when the sound faded did Ethan breathe again. Lyra looked up at him, eyes wide. "They find others like me," she whispered. "They take all." Ethan frowned. "How many?" Lyra shook her head sadly. "Many, thousands. My world gone." Her voice broke, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I only run because my mother pushed me into portal. She say, find kind world. Live." Ethan stared at her, speechless. A mother sacrificing her child to escape. It was something that cut deep into his heart. He clenched his fists. "Then we'll make her wish come true. You'll live, Lyra, I promise." They continued walking until they reached the edge of a cliff that overlooked the valley. From there, Ethan could see them. 3 black ships moving silently across the snow. Their lights flickered like fireflies, scanning the ground. "They're sweeping the area," he said under his breath. "We can't go down. We'll have to circle around through the caves." As they turned to move, a sudden sound echoed, a metallic screech. Ethan spun around. One of the drones had returned, and this time it wasn't alone. 2 more followed, their lights focusing directly on him. "Run!" Ethan shouted. They dashed into the woods, snow flying with every step. The drones fired thin beams of red light, melting snow where they hit. Trees hissed with steam. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her through the dense forest. They reached a frozen river. The surface was thick with ice. "Hold on to me," Ethan said, helping her cross. Behind them, the drones hovered closer. Ethan slipped once, but Lyra used her strange energy. Her eyes glowed for a second, and the air around them seemed to thicken. The nearest drone's light flickered and went dark. It fell, crashing into the snow. Ethan stared in awe. "You did that?" Lyra nodded weakly. "Small power. Only little." Little or not, that just saved us, Ethan said. They finally reached the cave entrance hidden behind a wall of ice. Ethan used his laser tool to melt a small opening and they squeezed through. Inside, the cave was dark, cold, and quiet, but safe for now. He set down their bag and knelt beside her. You okay? Lyra nodded but looked exhausted. They not stop. They find again. Ethan stared into the darkness of the cave. Then we'll be ready for them next time. He knew they couldn't hide forever, but something inside him had changed. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was angry. Angry at whoever hunted a starving child across galaxies. Angry that she had to beg for food at his door. The shadows of the cave flickered as he fed the small fire. Outside, faint red light still moved across the snow. Searching, and in that frozen silence, a human and an alien child waited. Two small sparks against the endless cold. The night fell once again, darker than before. The cave walls shivered with the cold wind that slipped through the narrow opening. Ethan sat near the faint glow of a small fire, sharpening a broken knife with slow, careful strokes. Each scrape echoed off the icy stone. Beside him, Lyra slept wrapped in blankets, her breathing soft and uneven. Every now and then she whimpered, whispering words in her own tongue, a language Ethan could not understand, but the pain in her voice was clear. Outside, the blizzard had ended. The air was still but not peaceful. The silence was heavy like the calm before something terrible. Ethan could feel it. The hunters were closing in. He rose to his feet, walked toward the cave's mouth, and peered out. The valley below shimmered faintly under the pale light of 3 moons. In the distance, the enemy ships had landed. He could see figures moving, tall, armored, glowing faintly red under the snow. Their shadows stretched long, their heads scanning, devices in their hands flashing as they tracked something through the storm's aftermath. They're getting closer, Ethan whispered. Lyra stirred awake, blinking. They come, she said weakly, her glowing eyes reflecting the flames. Yeah, Ethan replied, and we can't stay here much longer. He turned back to the cave wall, where he had spread out his tools, old equipment he'd brought from his cabin, metal wires, a compact welder, batteries, and a few small explosives used for mining. With steady hands, he started building something. Lyra sat up, curious. What you make? A distraction, he said with a half-smile. If we can't fight them, we'll make them fight ghosts. He attached a power cell to one of the small metal cylinders and checked the connections. When they get close, this will blow a hole in the snowbank. It'll sound like an explosion. While they chase that, we move toward the ridge. Lyra nodded, watching his hands with wide eyes. She admired how focused he was, how his face stayed calm even when danger was near. You not afraid? She asked quietly. Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. Of course I am, he admitted. But fear isn't the problem. It's what you do while you're afraid that matters. He finished wiring the explosives and set them by the cave entrance. The soft hum of energy filled the air. When I tell you to run, you don't look back. Understand? Lyra bit her lip but nodded. I run with you, he smiled slightly. Good girl. Hours passed. The red lights outside grew brighter. Strange voices echoed faintly across the valley, metallic, deep, not human. Then came the distant whine of engines powering up. They were scanning again, closer this time. The snow at the cave's mouth trembled from the vibration. Ethan grabbed his bag and slung it over his shoulder. Time to go, he whispered. He activated the first explosives timer and took Lyra's hand. Together, they slipped out through a narrow crack on the side of the cave and into the forest beyond. The trees stood like frozen soldiers, their branches heavy with frost. Each step they took sank deep into the snow, leaving a clear trail behind. As they moved, the air filled with the low hum of alien drones. Ethan glanced back. 3 of them hovered above the ridge, scanning the terrain. They're too fast, he muttered. We need cover. Lyra looked up at the glowing machines. They see heat, she whispered. They find us easy. Ethan's mind raced. Then we'll give them too much heat to follow. He opened the remote trigger and pressed a small button. A second later, the mountain shook. A deafening boom rolled through the night as snow exploded high into the sky. Fire and smoke burst upward, lighting the valley in orange light. The drones instantly turned toward the blast, rushing in that direction. Now, Ethan shouted. They ran through the snow, over roots between trees. The cold air burned in their lungs. Behind them, the roar of engines and shouts of the hunters filled the night. Lyra stumbled once, her small hands gripping Ethan's coat. He lifted her without slowing, carrying her through the deep snow. The girl was light, but every step was a fight against the freezing ground and exhaustion. Finally, they reached a cliffside where an old metal structure jutted out of the snow, a forgotten mining station from decades ago. Ethan forced the frozen door open and rushed inside. The air smelled of rust and old fuel. He set Lyra down gently. "Stay here," he said. "Catch your breath," she nodded weakly. "You help me. Always help." Ethan gave her a faint grin. "Someone has to." He looked around the room. The walls were lined with heavy machinery, broken conveyor belts, metal pipes, and empty fuel tanks. "Perfect," he muttered. "We can make a stand here." He grabbed some wires and started connecting them to the metal door. "If they follow us, this place will become a trap." Lyra's eyes flickered in the dim light. "Why you do this? You don't know me." Ethan paused, staring at her. "Because someone should have done this for us too," he said softly. "For all the times humans were lost and scared. Maybe it's our turn to help." Outside, the air began to hum again. The hunters were close. Their shadows flickered against the snow as they spread out across the ridge, their voices echoing in a strange, alien rhythm. Ethan took a deep breath and tightened his grip on the switch. "Stay low, Lyra. No matter what happens, don't make a sound." The chase wasn't over. It was only beginning. As the snow fell quietly outside, the first red beam cut through the darkness, striking the door of the mining station. The battle for survival had found them once more. The first blast shook the mining station like thunder. Dust fell from the ceiling as the metal walls groaned. Ethan grabbed Lyra and pulled her behind an old storage crate just as a burst of red light cut through the doorway, melting steel like butter. The hunters had found them. "Stay low," he shouted, covering her small body with his arm. The air filled with smoke and sparks. One of the hunters stepped through the door, tall and cold like a machine made of bones and armor. Its glowing eyes scanned the dark, clicking softly as it aimed its weapon. Ethan reached into his coat, pulled out a small flash device he'd built from spare circuits, and hurled it across the room. A burst of blinding white light exploded. The hunter let out a distorted metallic roar, staggering backward. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed Lyra's hand. "Run!" They slipped through a back tunnel, their footsteps echoing through the old mine. The sound of alien metal feet followed behind them, growing louder with each second. The tunnels twisted deep into the mountain, their walls glistening with ice. The deeper they ran, the colder it became, until even their breath turned to crystals in the air. Finally, Ethan stopped. The tunnel split in two directions. One side sloped upward toward a broken shaft. The other led down into darkness. He turned to Lyra. "Which way?" She closed her eyes, her mark glowing faintly beneath the bandage. "Down," she whispered. "Safe below. No machines there." He trusted her instinct. They moved downward, slipping through the narrow passage until they reached a wide chamber beneath the ice. Blue light shimmered through the frozen ceiling like trapped starlight. Strange shapes glowed inside the ice walls, ancient metal fragments, pieces of unknown technology buried long before humans arrived. Ethan looked around in awe. "This place, it's not human." Lyra nodded weakly. "Old ones. My people say long ago. Others came here, before me, before Earth had your kind." Ethan ran his fingers along the icy surface, feeling the faint hum of energy within. The metal was smooth and warm beneath the frost, pulsing like a heartbeat. "You think they're still here?" Lyra shook her head. "Gone. But power still sleeps." The distant echo of footsteps reminded them they didn't have much time. Ethan spotted an old control console half buried in ice and started clearing it off. "If this still works, maybe we can use it." He pressed a few buttons, and to his surprise, the ancient lights flickered to life, bathing the room in soft blue glow. Symbols appeared on the screen, alien text, looping and shifting like living script. Lyra stepped closer, eyes wide. "I know this," she whispered. It's same language as my world. She reached out, pressing her small hand to the screen. The system responded instantly, scanning her palm with a golden beam. The lights brightened. A soft hum filled the air, growing deeper and stronger. "What did you do?" Ethan asked, stepping back. "Wake it up," she said simply. "It help us." The walls trembled. The ice cracked in long, thin lines. A circular platform rose slowly from the ground, glowing with strange energy. Ethan helped Lyra step onto it. The platform shimmered, creating a protective dome of light around them. For a moment, warmth filled the air, and the sound of the hunters faded. "They can't see us now," Lyra said softly. "Old One's a shield. Hide us." Ethan stared in disbelief. "You mean this place has technology that can block their scans?" Lyra nodded, a small smile on her face. "Yes. Safe for now." Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe. He sat down beside her, exhaustion washing over him. "You know," he said quietly, "I never believed in aliens. Not until one knocked on my door." Lyra tilted her head, her glowing eyes curious. "You believe now?" He chuckled softly. "More than ever." For a moment, peace settled between them. The firelight blue glow painted their faces gently. Outside the dome, the hunters moved past, scanning the upper tunnels, unaware of the life hidden just below. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder. "You kind, human, my people, they forget kindness. Only power." Ethan looked at her and saw not an alien but a lost child who had seen too much pain. "Maybe that's what we're here for," he said, "to remind others what kindness looks like." But their peace didn't last. The console behind them flickered again, displaying strange symbols and a low warning tone. Lyra sat up. "Someone call." "From far?" she whispered. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "Signal. My people. Survivors." Ethan's eyes widened. "You mean there are more of you?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Few. Hiding. They far away. Other side of world. Maybe portal broken. They trapped here too." Ethan stood, mind racing. "Then we can't stay here forever. We have to find them." The girl looked uncertain. "Hunters still come." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll face them, together." The hum of the shield softened as the ancient machine powered down to save energy. Ethan tightened his coat, grabbed his pack, and looked toward the exit tunnel. "Rest while you can, Lyra," he said. "Tomorrow, we move. We find your people, and end this hunt." She smiled faintly, eyes shining like tiny stars. "With you? Maybe I'm not afraid anymore." Ethan gave a quiet nod. "Then that's enough for now." Outside the icy walls, the red lights of the hunters still glowed faintly, but deep, beneath the mountain, human warmth and alien courage had found a shelter of hope. The next morning the wind howled again, angrier, colder, alive with warning. Snow burst through the cracks of the tunnel entrance as if the mountain itself were trying to speak. Ethan woke first. He stirred the dying fire and checked the ancient console again, hoping it would show the same shield it had before. But the screen was dark now, lifeless. Whatever power had protected them had faded overnight. Lyra opened her eyes slowly, her face pale but calm. "It's sleep again," she said softly, pointing at the console. "Power gone." Ethan nodded. "Then we can't hide anymore." He packed their few supplies into his bag and looked toward the passage that led back up to the surface. "We'll have to move before they realize where we are." But when they climbed to the upper tunnels, the first sound they heard stopped them in their tracks, a deep metallic hum followed by heavy steps echoing through the stone. "They're already here," Ethan muttered. Lyra's small hand clutched his sleeve. "They find us?" He nodded grimly. "Not yet. But they're close." The hunters' voices echoed, low and harsh, mixing with the wind outside. They were scanning, calling to one another in that mechanical growl that made the walls vibrate. Ethan peeked through a crack in the rock and saw two tall figures standing in the snow outside the cave entrance. Their armor gleamed red, their movements precise, methodical. Ethan took a deep breath. If they get in, we're trapped. He looked around the tunnel and spotted a broken air vent along the side wall. Lyra, crawl through that vent. It leads to the cliffs outside. She shook her head. No, I stay with you. Listen, Ethan said firmly, kneeling to her level. If I can stop them here, you'll have a chance to reach the others. You told me your people are still out there. You can find them. Her eyes filled with tears. But you die. Maybe, he said with a faint smile. But if someone has to stand between them and you, it'll be me. Lyra hesitated, shaking her head again. No human fight hunters. Ethan's jaw tightened. This one will. He gave her his small communication device and pointed to a distant ridge visible through the ice. When the sky clears, go that way. Follow the stars. You'll find a beacon. It'll lead you to safety. Before she could protest again, the heavy sound of metal boots echoed closer. The hunters were entering the lower tunnels now. There was no time left. Ethan pushed her gently toward the vent. Go. Lyra looked at him one last time, eyes trembling. You kind, she whispered. You fight like Heart of Star. Ethan gave a small nod and she disappeared into the vent. Then he turned back toward the dark passage where red light began to spill across the icy floor. He pulled the last two charges of explosives from his pack and set them near the tunnel walls. His hands shook, but not from fear, from determination. Come on, he muttered under his breath. Let's see what you monsters are made of. The first hunter stepped into view, tall and armored, scanning with glowing lenses. It spotted him instantly. A voice echoed in its strange, robotic tone. Human, surrender target. You will not be harmed. Ethan smirked. Yeah, I've heard that before. He ducked behind a rock as a beam of red energy blasted past him, melting ice and stone. He rolled, grabbed his rifle, and fired back, a pulse shot that struck one hunter's chest, barely denting its armor. But the light from his weapon reflected off the snow, blinding them for a brief second. Ethan pressed the detonator. The tunnel exploded in a storm of fire and ice. The shockwave threw him back against the wall. The hunters staggered, their armor sparking. One of them fell. Its chest plate cracked open. Ethan crawled behind a pile of debris, coughing through the smoke. His ears rang, his vision blurry, but he saw the remaining hunter rising again, stronger, angrier. It roared and fired, blasting through stone. Come on, then, Ethan shouted, forcing himself to his feet. You want her? You'll have to go through me. He grabbed a steel rod from the floor, heated from the blast, and charged. The hunter swung its arm, but Ethan ducked and struck the glowing mark on its chest. Sparks flew and the machine howled. Ethan slammed the rod again and again until the armor split open, and then the storm outside burst through the tunnel, freezing air howling through the cracks. The blizzard roared like a beast unleashed. Snow and wind filled the air, cutting visibility to nothing. The final hunter lunged forward blindly, but Ethan used the storm to his advantage. He moved through the swirling snow like a shadow, striking again and again until the creature fell to its knees. Ethan stood there, breath visible, every muscle aching. The tunnel was half collapsed, the blizzard screaming outside. He dropped the steel rod and leaned against the icy wall. That's for her, he whispered. As the storm carried away the sound of battle, Ethan stumbled toward the entrance. Through the blowing snow, he saw a small figure far down the ridge, Lyra, running toward the horizon, her faint blue glow moving like a star in the storm. A tired smile crossed his face. Good girl, he whispered. The wind howled, covering his tracks, burying the fallen machines beneath fresh snow. For a long moment, only the blizzard spoke, carrying the story of one human stand across the frozen world. The storm had passed. What remained was silence, deep, cold, and endless. The once roaring blizzard now slept beneath a soft blanket of snow. The sun broke through for the first time in days, painting the white valley in gold. Steam rose from the wreckage of the fallen hunters, their red armor cracked and half-buried. The air smelled of smoke and frost. Ethan stirred weakly among the ruins of the tunnel. His body ached from every blow and his hands were frozen numb, but he was alive. The heat from the explosions had kept the ice from swallowing him completely. Slowly, he sat up coughing, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. He looked around. The battlefield was quiet now. The hunters were gone or destroyed. His head spun, but one thought pushed through the pain. Lyra. He forced himself to stand, using a bent metal beam for balance. "Lyra!" he called out weakly, his voice hoarse. The echo died quickly in the frozen air. He stumbled toward the cave entrance, his boots sinking deep into the snow. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he reached the ridge, the world opened before him. The snow glittered like glass, and far below, the frozen forest stretched endlessly. He scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of her. Then he saw it. A faint blue light moving slowly between the trees, too steady to be a reflection. A weak laugh escaped his throat. "You made it," he whispered. With what little strength he had left, Ethan began to follow. The path was long, winding through the remains of the storm. His mind drifted as he walked, memories flashing like old film reels. The knock at his door, her fragile voice asking for food, her small hand holding his in the snow. He never thought something from the stars could feel so human. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, but the cold never left. Just as Ethan's legs began to fail him, he saw movement ahead. A figure stepped out from the trees, small, wrapped in blankets, eyes glowing faintly blue. "Lyra." She gasped and ran toward him, snow spraying around her feet. "Ethan!" Her voice was stronger now, though still trembling. She caught him just as his knees gave way, holding him up as best she could. "You made it," she said softly, tears in her eyes. He smiled faintly, brushing snow from her hair. "Told you. I would." She shook her head, her face full of worry. "You hurt. You fight too much. Guess I'm not good at running," he said with a dry laugh. Lyra helped him to a nearby log, half buried in snow. He sat down, breathing heavily. The morning light shone on her silver skin, and for the first time since he met her, she didn't look afraid. "I found the signal," she said quietly. "The one from my people. It far, but still here. They wait." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then you have to go to them." She looked down. "Not alone. You come too," he smiled weakly. "Lyra, I'm human. They might not even want me there." Her expression grew firm and almost human stubbornness. "You saved me. You saved my life. My people need to know what you did. You show them what human heart is." Ethan looked at her and saw something deeper. Hope. Real hope, not just survival, but the start of something new. He sighed and nodded. "All right, kid. Lead the way." Together they walked across the snowfield. The wind had softened now, carrying only whispers. Far above, the sky shimmered faintly with streaks of color, northern lights dancing between the clouds. It felt like the planet itself was watching them, holding its breath. By the time they reached the frozen lake at the valley's edge, the signal grew stronger. A soft hum filled the air. Lyra's mark on her arm began to glow brighter, no longer red with pain but blue with life. She raised her arm toward the horizon, and the ground beneath them vibrated softly. From the clouds above, a beam of light broke through. A ship, sleek, silver, and quiet, descended gracefully onto the ice. Its hull shimmered like liquid metal. A ramp extended and figures stepped out, tall aliens with markings like Lyra's, their eyes wide in disbelief. One of them ran forward, calling her name. Lyra smiled and ran to them, then turned back to Ethan. "Come," she said, reaching out her hand. He hesitated, looking up at the sky. The sun had broken fully now, shining over the snow. "Guess humanity's about to make some new friends," he murmured. He took her hand and walked toward the ship. The alien leader bowed his head slightly in respect, a gesture Ethan didn't expect. No words were needed. They knew what had happened here. As the ramp closed and the ship began to rise, Ethan looked down at the white valley one last time. The cabin was far away now, buried under snow. The place where a lonely man once lived had become something else, a symbol of what humanity could be when faced with the unknown. Lyra sat beside him, her small hand still holding his. "You saved me," she said softly. "Now I save you." Ethan smiled as the stars filled the window. Fair trade. Outside, the world below grew smaller and smaller. Snow fell quietly again, covering the scars of battle, as dawn promised a new beginning for both human and alien kind.